Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do another recipe out of this, a guide to good cooking compiled by the makers of Five Roses Flour. The makers of Five Roses Flour was the Lake of the Woods Milling Company, and this was published in 1932. There's a series of these. I've got these into the 1980s. This was a consistent cookbook that could be found in parts of Canada where the Five Roses brand was sold. These cookbooks were made in both English and French. This one is well loved. A lot of pages that had coupons. The coupons have been cut out and sent back to the company for, I imagine these coupons were to get the next cookbook or to send cookbooks to your friends. And Lake of the Woods Milling, Lake of the Woods, about 6 weeks ago, I flew over Lake of the Woods. Absolutely stunning part of the country. Lake of the Woods is just beautiful. And it's an area that when I was younger, we went to all the time. Quetico Provincial Park is there. Beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go to Lake of the Woods, go. And if you're from the United States, you don't have to come into Canada because Lake of the Woods is trans-border. It's on both sides. Some of it's in the United States, most of it's in Canada. Anyway, we're going to make orange honey bread today. In this pot, I've got water, salt, and baking soda ready to go, but we need to chop up the orange rind. It asks for the rind of 2 oranges, and in this case, context is everything. Because we're going to cook it in this solution for half an hour, they want the white pith left on. 2025, most recipes call for rasping off just the zest and leaving the bitter pith behind. But boiling it in this solution will take away some of that bitterness. But before we boil it, we need to chop it up. It says to put it into a food chopper. I'm going to use the 2025 equivalent of a food chopper, which is this food processor. And here we go. I'm going to say that looks pretty good. So let's get a spatula. And we'll get this into the pot. And it goes. And we'll get the heat on here, get this up to a boil. So the recipe actually says to cook for 30 minutes. My initial reaction is to bring it to a boil and boil it for 30 minutes. But perhaps a full-scale rolling boil is not what they're asking for. Maybe it's just a simmer, because 30 minutes is a long time. So I'm going to set this to a simmer, and we'll come back in 30 minutes. Okay, so now we drain this. There we go, drained. We add in a half a cup of water. And since this is orange honey bread, we now need to add some honey. So I've got a part jar of honey here. We're supposed to put in 1 cup of honey. And so I'll get this in. What's left in this jar. Okay, so you know me, I measure carefully. I'm going to say there was a half a cup of honey left in this jar. So I need to make up another half cup of honey, and I'm going to use this. This is buckwheat honey. None of my cousins produce buckwheat honey, or none of my cousins' bees produce buckwheat honey. It's a bit of a difficult one because not many farmers grow buckwheat, and you need the bees to only eat the buckwheat in order to produce this honey. It's like the blackstrap molasses of honey. It's really dark color, and it's got this dark, rich, deep flavor. It's the kind of thing that I eat on toast, but I don't cook with all that often because it can be overpowering. So I figured in this instance, because I was mixing it with another honey, we would be fine. So in that goes. The idea now is I'm supposed to cook this down until it's the consistency of a marmalade. But I am slightly worried that I might not have enough water in the bottom because The recipe calls for 2 orange peels, but how big is an orange? And maybe the navel oranges that I used were too big. We'll keep an eye on this and we'll play around with it and see what happens. Now, we're moving on to the next section. Let me get out what I need here. So, I need to beat an egg into a cup of milk. So I'll get a cup of milk. And 1 egg. And then in this jug, we're going to put most of the dry ingredients, not all of them. So we're going to start out with flour. At this point, I'm thinking that's 3 cups of flour. It doesn't say how many bread tins. It says bread tins. Pour into well-greased bread pans. I'm thinking it's 2 bread pans based on this amount of flour and stuff. But what size, who knows? So we've got the flour, baking powder, and salt. And I'm wondering, do I just do it in 1 big loaf pan? Because I've got some really big loaf pans. So during this part of the recipe, I'm thinking about that. In days of old, you, as the kitchen owner, the baker, you got to choose how you baked it. This could have been done probably in muffin tins, or as a loaf, or as like a square or a rectangular cake pan. Didn't really need to be baked as a bread because it is a quick bread. This version, although I found this recipe in much older cookbooks, and it was a yeasted bread. Not kneaded though, just yeasted, and the yeast gave the rise instead of the chemical leavening that we're using here, which was pretty common even for a lot of cakes, to be leavened by yeast. You just didn't knead it like a bread. You didn't work it to produce those long strings of gluten. Okay, this is going to take some time. This is probably 15 or 20 minutes away, so I'm going to stop the process at this point, let this finish, and then we'll come back. It's been about 20 minutes. Most of the liquid is gone. What's there seems really syrupy. I'm going to say that is complete. So I'm going to turn the heat off, and we'll turn our attention back to the other ingredients. Now, we mix the milk into the dry ingredients, or the milk and the egg into the dry ingredients, a little bit at a time. Now we mix in the orange. That's mixed pretty well. Now, in this time period, baking soda was always dissolved in water before you mixed it in. Today, we just mix it in with the flour. When I put the baking powder in with the flour at the beginning, that's today when we would add the baking soda. Don't really dissolve it anymore. There were a bunch of reasons for that, and then we figured out that it didn't need to be done. And it's one of those things that I still see persisting in some recipes today. Holdover, a carryover, totally not necessary. You could have put the baking soda, or I could have put the baking soda in with the flour when I did the baking powder. Totally. Now, 3 ingredients left, and they all just go in. So, I've got some pecans. Asks for nut meats. Could be any nut meat that you want. Asks for shortening. I'm using butter. Butter is a type of shortening. And that goes in now. And the baking soda dissolved in the water. And you mix this just until combined. It's pretty hot here today. That butter is almost completely melted. Now, I'm going to take a chance on one large loaf pan. I've got it greased and ready to go. It's an oddball size, 9 by 2.5 by 5 by 2.5 by 2.75. Would be great if it just gave you the volume of what that is. I'm sure math is easy. You can figure it out. Anyway, in it goes. Yeah, this pan's going to be more than fine. Now the recipe tells me to leave this someplace warm for about 20 minutes. I'm just going to leave it on the counter here because it is currently 35 degrees Celsius in the studio and it is humid, unbelievably humid. It probably feels like 40 degrees Celsius in here. Anyway, we'll come back in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, no real change, maybe a little bit of rise. Now it goes into the oven. And this is going to cook for about an hour, but you know, cooking times, baking times are a gross approximation. Your time will vary greatly.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends.
So, orange honey bread.
Orange honey bread.
It's quick bread. So
Okay.
it's not
like a soda bread.
It's a soda bread. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't look like a bread, yeast bread. It does look. It's orange.
Yeah.
I'm not tasting a lot of honey though. Where does the honey? Is that the only sugar in it? Like the
Only sugar
Okay.
is the honey. There's one cup of carefully measured honey in there. So it's probably a cup and a quarter at least.
It's okay, but it's not meant to taste like honey. Honey's just the
Sweetener.
The
But
sweetener.
I did use buckwheat. And I had expected some of the buckwheat to come through, right? Isn't that amazing?
Now that might be something you can only tell.
Can you?
Can you smell that?
Oh, it's amazing.
You either love it or hate it.
I love it.
But then if you made it with a different honey, maybe it would have maybe that's when you would notice the difference.
Maybe. I had expected a bit more of that honey flavor. This would be great toasted. Mm-hmm. I got to tell you, as I slather some more butter on it. There was a point when I was making this where I was like, this had better be unbelievably good for the amount of time it's taking me to make this.
Yes, I think I remember that point. Mm-hmm. It happened to be home when he's like, that was just more complicated than I thought it should be. But it's very good. It's got a nice orange flavor to it.
It turned out great. Would I make it a second time? Possibly not. It would not be in the regular rotation. But it is one of those things that, maybe 3 years from now I'll go, remember that honey bread we made, the honey orange bread? We should make that again. Definitely worth a try, especially if you love orange and honey. Quite good, but not something that would be in the regular rotation. Although I'll have that.
Due to its.
Yeah, it's just, you're essentially making,
Well, then I have the question. Because you were saying you make a marmalade.
yes, there's the shortcut.
I was going to say, could you not just throw in a marmalade?
There's the shortcut. Just use a bottle of orange marmalade in this.
We have lots of
Save
that.
yourself the problem of making the orange marmalade and then making the bread. Anyway,
If you do need a recipe for orange marmalade, though, we've got one.
somewhere back, deep back on the channel, there's one. It's really good. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.